asked me what's so special about Hali. What's Hali anyway? Sort of the state of being, or maybe even in some ways you could say in Swahili, sort of how are you, how's your health, how's your state of being. That's what Hali means, but it's also an acronym. Hali is the Health for Animals and Livelihood Improvement Project. We are invited to Tanzania to look at the impact of water restriction in a changing ecosystem here in rural Tanzania. The Hali project incorporates Sokoine University of Agriculture, and in Sokoine University of Agriculture we're led by Professor Ludovic Kozwala, who's an amazing zoonotic disease specialist.
The mission of Hali is to look at the diminishing water resource within the Ruaha River. How does it impact on disease transmission between livestock and wildlife, and also to the human population which is living around Ruaha River.
If we can go back in the history of Tanzania or many African countries, they were all nomad pastoralists. Agro-pastoralists are people they do agriculture and they have cattle, but they don't move as pastoralists who are just there herding their cattle. But until recently, when government started policies of creating national park, these pastoralists and agro-pastoralists, they were now being restricted to move, and now that has changed their lifestyle. The only place we can find clean drinking water, the only place you can find fertile land is near these national parks. So now there is a migration toward those national parks. So you have three issues. One is an issue of wildlife conservation. Second, there are agriculturists who need water for irrigation, for cultivation. And third, pastoralists who need water for livestock. As a result, it can be a risk factor for disease transmission between human, wildlife, and livestock.
I started the wildlife piece as a postdoctoral project, and we've been working very closely with both the Wildlife Conservation Society, Ruaha Landscape Program, Tanzanian National Parks, and the newly formed Pawage Idodi Wildlife Management Area, which is an association of 21 villages that have banded together to form a wildlife management protected area near the border of Ruaha. Water is becoming more limited. Human, wildlife, and animal populations, domestic animals, are coming into closer contact with each other. And from a health standpoint, we think this may actually increase disease transmission from animals to people, and also from domestic animals to wildlife, and back again. This in turn makes more stress on the system. So people and animals are already stressed from a shortage of water, but they may also be getting more problems from disease. What we've been doing on the wildlife piece is trying to look and see if one of the diseases of concern that we have, which is bovine tuberculosis, has actually gotten into the wildlife population. We know from other work that bovine tuberculosis is in the livestock population. It's a disease of cattle. It makes cattle sick, and it's a long-term disease, but both people can get bovine tuberculosis from drinking raw milk or eating undercooked meat, but also wildlife can get bovine TB from interactions with livestock, and this may be happening as the populations come closer and closer. So for the wildlife part of the study, we've been working with both legal hunters and game scouts, both in the wildlife management area and in the park, to collect samples from wildlife and to test them for bovine tuberculosis. And we do all the testing in Tanzania at the veterinary school at Sokoine University of Agriculture.
I'm a professor of veterinary public health and epidemiology. My role in the Hali project, I'm a co-principal investigator responsible for the laboratory part of the Hali project in Tanzania. First of all, for water samples, we are checking for waterborne pathogens. From the livestock samples, this will be similar to the wildlife samples. We are getting two types of samples, tissues and serum samples. So we get these samples in the lab, we do the analysis. If we have strains from, say, cattle looking similar to the wildlife, then we can know that there's transmission between wildlife and cattle.
These wildlife management areas, they're very remote, so we have a challenge of logistically setting up a system, working with hunters and scouts to actually get samples in quickly so that they can be frozen or refrigerated and then sent for analysis.
Starting in the 1980s, there were some World Bank finance projects that put in big irrigation schemes for rice cultivation in a semi-arid landscape. The irrigation schemes went in. This created the opportunity for the channelization of creating illegal irrigation off of the authorized irrigation. Water was brought to the rice fields through cement-lined ditches, but then returned to the river through earth-lined ditches, which was not a good system. So a lot of the water never made it back to the river. As this put greater pressures on the Ruaha ecosystem, we saw through the last 2 decades slowly the drying up of the river.
The head of the household are men. So we are talking with the men, and then we can ask the permission to test the animals. Depending with how many animals he has. So we have our proportion of our sample size, 10 up to 25. So if anybody or somebody has got about 10 animals, but those animals, they have to qualify for testing, it has to be more than 2 years old. We can advise the farmer, or we can advise the pastoralist if the animal is positive, or if the animal is suspect, or if the animal is negative. So to advise the farmer, you are requesting the farmer to slaughter those animals within the suspect and the positive. Any animals with positive, apart from asking him or her to slaughter, what we always trying to educate them, please take these animals away from the head. One of the reasons is the chances of transmitting the diseases within the head is high. And the second, the chances of transmitting the disease from the animal, from your cow or bull to the family is very high. And they're talking about 12 centimeters apart.
This is a very interdisciplinary project that involves economists like myself, veterinarians, wildlife health professionals, public health people, chemists, water specialists, landscape modelers, really trying to understand disease from multiple perspectives.
Proximity between human, wildlife, and livestock will create a public health problem. And to address the public health problem, we have to understand what's the veterinary part of it, what's the human dimension of that, and what's the socioeconomic dimension of that. The culture, customs, nutrition, the way people behave, the way people act everyday life has an impact. So it's the interdisciplinary team that is trying to understand the dynamics of infectious diseases in that region.
How are we putting more and more pressure on fewer and fewer resources and creating the emergence of newer, stronger disease vectors? Of course, climate change is the big unknown. How is a changing climate, a rapidly changing weather climate system in these environments, changing the conditions for disease emergence? That's the big unknown that we really don't have a good handle on yet. What we're seeing with any new disease, any new infectious disease outbreak, is the ability of that disease to spread faster than we ever thought possible. And of course, it's because we're a globally connected society. Now, a pastoralist in the most rural part of Africa who comes to sell his or her products in a city that interacts with a tourist who jumps on the plane that's in the United States the next day, what used to take months, if not years, for a disease epidemic in one continent to get to another now can happen in the course of 12 hours. We have to be thinking of, one, global health. Everything is connected, and the more we think about these connections, the more we realize that the old way of health interventions of treating the individual, or thinking about medicine in terms of one particular species, or thinking about human medicine in terms of just humans, is outdated. We have to really be thinking about all of the connections between species and between species and their environments and the health of the whole system.
Clearly, human well-being corresponds to the health and function of ecosystems, our coexistence with animals, and the changing environments we all share. Vermont scientists continue to conduct fascinating research, and we've enjoyed highlighting their work as new topics and ideas in the scientific community emerge. A repeating theme for Vermont researchers is their willingness to examine complex problems using novel techniques and an interdisciplinary perspective. One Health is an example of this advanced thinking and collaborative spirit. We're confident it will help create a healthier world for all. I'm Amy Seidel. Please join me next time for more Emerging Science.